Sometimes an old story, a fable you might have heard as a kid, can just perfectly capture something happening in the world today. Well, we're about to unpack a pretty compelling argument that uses one of those classic fables to look at American politics in a whole new way. So the story goes like this. A scorpion comes to a riverbank and sees a frog. He can't swim, so he asks the frog, "Hey, can you give me a ride to the other side?" The frog, of course, is like, "No way, you'll sting me." But the scorpion makes a pretty logical case. "If I sting you, we both drown. What's the point in that?" Makes sense, right? So the frog agrees, the scorpion hops on his back, and they head out into the water. But then, right in the middle of the river, the frog feels this sudden, sharp pain. The scorpion stung him, and now they're both going under. As the poison starts to work and they're both sinking, the frog just has to ask, "Why? We're both gonna die." And the scorpion gives this simple, bone-chilling reply, "I couldn't help it. It's my nature." Okay, so why am I telling you this story? Because according to our source material, this little fable has become a seriously potent description of American politics. It's not just a story about trust anymore. It's become a metaphor for power. So in this explainer, we're going to break down how this fable is used to build a powerful argument, an argument about political outrage, what the author calls the illusion of principle, and the real, deep-seated nature of the American state. All right, let's see how this all connects, starting with what the author calls the comforting stories we often hear, particularly from partisan media. Our source material points to an outlet like Fox News and says it creates something called an illusion. It uses all the right language, limited government, constitutionalism, to paint a picture where Republicans are always the defenders of restraint and Democrats are always socialists trying to ruin everything. And the author argues the real goal here isn't just to persuade you, it's to condition you, to train you to only see abuses of power when they come from the other side. And you can see this illusion in action. Take the COVID pandemic. The source points out that when Democratic governors used emergency powers, it was often talked about as this massive, unconstitutional overreach. But when Republican governors did pretty much the exact same things, shutting down businesses, expanding their own authority, the coverage often softened, framing it as, a tough but necessary call. And it doesn't stop there. Think about economic policy. The author highlights how things like tariffs or big government subsidies get blasted as socialism when they're proposed by Democrats. But when Republicans push for those very same policies, suddenly they get rebranded as being tough or patriotic. But here's the thing. The author argues this isn't just about one side being hypocritical. It actually points to something much, much deeper about the American state itself, a reality that both parties have had a hand in creating. And this brings us to the author's most provocative point. The argument is that the republic the founders designed, the one with really strict limits on federal power, that version of America, the one we hear about on TV, didn't really make it out of the 19th century. It changed into something else entirely. So what did it change into? The source gives it a name, the welfare and warfare state. And this is a really crucial idea. It's described as this huge centralized system that's been built up for decades by both parties. It's a combination of massive spending programs at home and constant military intervention abroad. In this new reality, the way people use the Constitution changes too. It stops being this consistent rulebook that limits everyone's power. Instead, it becomes more like a weapon you pull out when it's convenient, to use against your political enemies. And this selective outrage has a really clear pattern. The author points out that when your opponent uses executive power for, say, a foreign intervention, the constitutional outrage is through the roof. But when it comes to the slow, steady growth of government spending at home, or the power of federal agencies, suddenly that outrage gets a whole lot quieter. Okay, so if this system has been quietly growing for so long, where does a figure like Donald Trump fit in all of this? I mean, he felt like a total break from the past, right? Well, the author's answer is a direct challenge to that idea. The argument is that the biggest mistake we can make is thinking Trump was some kind of historical accident, a complete rupture from everything that came before. He wasn't. So how does that work? The source lays it out like this. For decades, Democrats worked to expand the size and power of the state. Then Republicans would get elected, not to shrink it back down, but to just manage it, and in doing so, normalize its new, bigger size. Then along comes Trump, who inherits this massive machine of power. And according to the author, he just used it more openly, without all the polite fictions and illusions. The source also has a critique for what it calls the libertarian alibi. That's the idea that if you just vote for Republicans to get some small, incremental reforms, you'll eventually shrink the government. The author argues that history shows this has been a total failure. At the end of the day, all those small compromises have just added up to more government, not less. Okay, let's bring this whole thing back to where we started, with our scorpion and our frog, and get to the author's final point about political outrage. This quote really gets to the absolute heart of the argument. The author basically says, look, if your outrage is predictable, if it only shows up when the other team is in charge and magically vanishes when your side does the exact same thing, then that's not principle. It's just a performance. Which brings us back to the river. The author's conclusion is that we shouldn't act all shocked and surprised when the scorpion stings the frog. The frog shouldn't be surprised. Given the very nature of the system we've all helped build, this outcome was pretty much baked into the cake. And this is where the author leaves us, with one last, really provocative question. The argument is that we're asking the wrong thing. The question isn't why did the scorpion act according to its nature? The real, much deeper question is, who or what taught the scorpion that it could get away with it? And the answer, according to the source, is, well, it's uncomfortable. It's not one person or one group. It's a lesson that's been taught over a long time by all of us, by voters who reward politicians for using power, by courts that always seem to defer to the executive, by a Congress that just gives away its authority, and yeah, by media outlets that find a way to rationalize whatever their side does. The scorpion learns a very clear lesson. There might be some outrage, but in the end, there won't be any real consequences. So it just expects the right.